So for me, the number one rule in hot new yoga, obviously, was no sex. And you could be affectionate, you could be sensual, you could not grab each other's. I mean, and obviously,
In this episode of Off the Mat, Yogi Aaron joins us, who is an explorer of movement and the human body, who is on a mission to help you unlock your full potential and become pain-free. He is the OG, the Mac Daddy of Naked Men's Yoga. Lots of storytelling. So grab your popcorn and enjoy the show. Welcome back to Off the Mat. I'm Will. I'm one of your hosts today, and I am once again joined by my bestie, Coco, who is going to present a super, super fabulous guest. So, Coco, take it away.
Hey, can you believe it? I have made it back like 3 or 4 weeks in a row. Things are going good. And I'm super excited to be here. And we are not two, but three again today. We are joined by another of my biggest mentors and inspirations, Yogi Aaron. Can you say hello to everybody, Yogi Aaron?
hey, everybody.
Aaron is a huge inspiration to me for many reasons. A lot of you, I'm sure, know him because he is kind of the daddy of naked yoga for men in the modern world. Of course, men have been doing yoga naked for thousands of years, but that kind of got pushed into the shadow realm for a long time because of purity culture and Christianity and all kinds of things. And it's back now, and we're doing it. And we have Yogi Aaron largely to thank for that.
Thank
Yay!
you. I appreciate that.
Oh, and by the way, not only that, but also we're going to get into what his thing is now because naked yoga is, you know, it's a thing, it's happening. And now he's going beyond that and revolutionizing yoga in other ways. So it's going to be a very exciting conversation.
Always trailblazing here, forging new paths.
Totally. And
Thanks, guys, for having me on. I love it.
of course, yeah. And like if I could just kind of like generalize what is so inspiring about you is that you're not afraid to ruffle feathers and you're not afraid to do things that are not supposed to be done. And you do it so powerfully and so publicly and so well.
Thank you. Well, with the hot new yoga business, I mean, the universe just kind of poured it on me. I didn't really have to do much. I just kind of created the space and then people started showing up. And then I had like an oh shit moment. Now I have to teach them. And so that was just me kind of stepping into that space. And but it was like a huge it was a great gift to be able to be a steward of doing that and being open. This is one of my favorite expressions, being open to the universe of limitless possibilities and just being I think fearless and saying yes to anything. I think one of the biggest kind of moments of publicity I ever had in my whole life was going on the Howard Stern show. And most people would like be really afraid of doing something like that. And my publicist at the time convinced me to do it. And of course, I had to get naked on the show. There's still copies of that show out there somewhere going around. And I think just kind of being able to go into those spaces and know who you are, and then also being able to fearlessly step into them is really important. And just being willing to say yes to anything that comes in your way. That's how I've lived my life and gone forward. So thank you for your accolations.
Your name has been shared around since I started teaching yoga. There's a gentleman, and I won't say his last name, but his name is Joe. And I met him through a teacher training workshop in LA. We happened to befriend each other. He comes to visit me in San Francisco. And then he asked, hey, by the way, have you taken naked yoga with Aaron? And that was the first time I've heard naked yoga with Aaron. And so, no, I have not. And he's one of your students. And it's just fast forward to 2024. We've had guests on here. We've had Victor join us in the show. We've had Rocky join us in the show, and your name, keeps surfacing. I'm curious, who was the person that turned you on to naked yoga that you took it to that level?
Okay, there's two kind of inspirations for the naked yoga, maybe three. So the first thing is I went to an all boys boarding school, and growing up in an all boys boarding school, there was not a lot of shame, especially as we got older, around our bodies. We used to go on 3-week canoe trips, and at the end of the canoeing day, we would just all tear our clothes off and go into the water and swim. And then, of course, hanging out in the dormitory, and there was communal showers. So being naked was very natural. And I wouldn't say like we were like hanging out naked, but it just was part of our life, like, either in our underwear or, like I said earlier, going into the showers or going swimming or whatever. It just was part of our life. And that for me was a big part of instilling a sense of brotherhood. Like, I mean, there's just something that's very potent about hanging out with other men in a very kind of physical environment and doing things together physically. And so that really seeded something inside of me. Then, fast forward just a little bit, I moved to Vancouver, and I lived in Vancouver for, a long period, and then hanging out at Wreck Beach. And Wreck Beach is probably the most popular naked beach in the whole world. I don't know any other beach that rivals Wreck Beach in terms of its fame and the culture of that beach. And so that was like, wow, I just love this. And for me, in the gay world especially, there's so much emphasis on sex. Gay men just do not know how to relate to each other unless it's grabbing another man's dick. And that has always been something that has saddened me enormously. And so I remember one time, it was in my 20s, I want to say probably 25, 26. And I was thinking to myself, wouldn't it be really great to just create a really, I'm going to use this word and I don't mean it in a judgmental way, but a healthy environment for gay men to be naked in, and where there's not like sex. And so that sort of started playing around in my mind. And then the third thing that kind of happened was I was starting to teach yoga. And back in the days in my 20s, it was more about the workout than what it was supposed to be about, which meant heat and sweat and all of these things. And I remember kind of joking with the students, who, by the way, were females at that time. We should just take our clothes off because our clothes are so drenched in sweat. And wouldn't it just make more sense just to get rid of our clothes? So now fast forward a few more years, I'm in New York City. I really wanted to teach gay men, and I was trying to put myself out there and kind of get clients and develop like a private clientele. And I just kind of had this idea one day. I was like, we should start a naked yoga class. And I remember I was crossing over 6th Avenue at 23rd Street, and I was in the middle of the Avenue of Americas, and this idea came down into like the Bindu chakra into my third eye, hot nude yoga. And then that's how it all started. So it wasn't like a straight line, but it was just all of these different elements started to, I kind of lay the groundwork. And so for me, the number one rule in hot nude yoga, obviously, was no sex. And you could be affectionate, you could be sensual, you could not grab each other's dicks. I mean, and obviously assholes. And and so I mean, but everything else was free game pretty much. And obviously kissing. And so, but everything else was pretty much on the table. And that instilled an environment of safety. It also instilled this place where people got to connect on a very different and potent level. And when you're in a room sitting in that kind of like sexual energy, sensual energy, erotic energy for 2.5, sometimes my classes would go for 3 hours. For that period of time, something inside of you just starts to build that's so potent and transformative. I mean, the amount of transformation I saw during those 10 years was mind blowing to me. So that's how it all got started.
Mind blown. So you
You
are
didn't
the,
think like a boys' boarding school would lay the groundwork for this
I mean,
movement that went worldwide. And if only my boarding school teachers knew.
Jesus, Yogi Aaron, you're like the Madonna of pop music. You're like the first of its kind, right? That's amazing, man. That seriously blows my mind, because it's like it takes courage, confidence, and vulnerability to like encompass all of those things, still be a gay
Yeah,
man and be a white man, and said, you know what, there's this heavenly message that I'm getting, and why not give it a shot?
yeah,
And look at it now. The internet is blowing up with naked classes here and there. It's just amazing. So bravo,
yeah.
man,
Thank you.
bravo.
Thank you. I'll tell you something. My very first class, I was scared out of my mind. And I remember I had a friend of mine who was Colombian. And I mention that only because his thick accent is seared into my mind. And he was so excited about this idea of hot nude yoga. But, anyways, he helped me greet people at the door. He collected money, he collected their name and email address and et cetera, and then sent them up. And I was so terrified and petrified that nobody was going to come, that I wasn't going to be able to teach a good class, that I just decided to lie down in Shavasana. And I kind of made a mental note like, okay, when it's time, come up from Shavasana and then turn around and start teaching. And so I did. I just laid down there and waited until everybody got in and then stood or sat up, turned around, and then there was 18 people in front of me. I almost had a heart attack, opened my mouth and just started teaching. And the next class there was 36 people. So something was working very quickly.
One of the things, my observation also is that I've been following it for quite some time now, especially during the pandemic. And I think that you and I even had like I was a guest on your show. Thanks for having
Yes.
me. And one of the things that every time they have a birthday, I'm like, please have a birthday suit. Like, don't put your clothes back on now. You know what I mean? Like you started this movement, and I was like, I would like to see you age well with that and just show the kids like it's not about you being sexy, it's not about you being young, it's about being comfortable. And I there's this ageism that takes place, and as a gay man, I think that we feel the pressure also of aging, like a lot of women do, for instance, and we still had a little body shame, and because we don't look, act, perform a certain way. It's like every time I see you in your birthday suit, like somewhere, I'm like, you go, girl. Go on, sister.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I've stepped away from this space very intentionally for the most part. I've kind of put my toe into it a few times. I was just in LA in last January, and taught at Victor's studio. So I do put my toe back into it, but I feel like it's time for other people to carry the reins. And my dharma is taking me elsewhere. And who knows, maybe in 10 years, I'll, as you say, be guiding gay men in a different way. But I feel like for now that my calling is elsewhere. And so that's kind of where I'm putting my energy these days.
Fabulous, fabulous. I'm just waiting for Roscoe to jump back on because I know that we want to deeply get into the AYAMA, but
Yes.
I want to make a proper
Yes.
introduction with that. But Roscoe,
Can you guys hear me?
yes, Coco, we can
Yes.
hear you.
Okay, I had to change to a different headset because Um, sorry, it started raining. So when that starts happening, everything changes. I can't hear anything. So um, Aaron knows. So
Yes. Oh, I know.
yeah, it's a Costa Rica thing. If you live in Costa
It's
Rica with a tin roof in the month of October, it's intense. Um,
yes.
but I did hear the word AYAMA. It didn't start raining hard enough for me to not hear that. So, one of the main things that we want to talk to you today about is a very spicy and controversial topic, which is AYAMA yoga. And it's something that I'm very into. And I'm actually about to embark on actually getting certified in the technique because I'm such a believer. I've been along with Yogi Aaron for not the whole process of him learning that. That's been a much longer story. But since he started really putting it out there and writing the book Stop Stretching, um, right about that time, I feel like this is definitely like in my dharma because right at that time, I was actually starting to develop some pretty serious pain from tech neck. I had been doing a lot of projects on my computer. I had been editing a vlog and my workstation was horrible. So I was doing the extreme of what everyone's doing these days. And I hadn't hit that point in adulthood of like really starting to like have consequences for my bad posture and mistreating my body yet. So I was like, nah, it's not that. It's not that. And Aaron got me to read the book and listen to the podcast, Stop Stretching. And by the time I got done, I was like, oh my God, it's so obvious. Um, it's happening. And I did his Fix My Neck series. And guess what? It worked. So I became a believer really quickly, started implementing, and it fucked me up. Like it changes how you teach yoga. So it was a process of
There's a
adjust.
mourning period.
Oh, there is. Like we've talked about human design on this podcast as well, and learning about that like threw me off as well because it's like, oh, okay, like it's not a seven chakra system anymore. Okay, and I got to learn this new system. It was the same with Ayama, where it's like, oh, like what we thought was good is not, and now we do this, and like now I have to like try to bring my students along on this journey, but I have them listen to your podcast. I have them read the book if they question and doubt, and I'm converting people. So why don't you tell us more about it? Like
Yay.
you're the expert. So tell us about Ayama Yoga.
Well, I mean, you're familiar with my story, which is kind of similar to your story that I got into yoga when I was around 18, being in a boys, excuse me, being in a boys boarding school. I was very active. There was like dog sledding, snowshoeing 50 mile snowshoe races. I was a trail runner, cross country runner, um, volleyball player, soccer. I mean, just go down the list. I did it. And by 18, I started to notice that I was tightening up a lot. And of course, we always hear that if you want to stay young and healthy, you should stretch. And so for me, it was very hard as a discipline just to stretch. So that kind of got me into yoga, and I got into yoga to stretch. Very quickly, I actually hurt myself. I remember the day very clearly. I was moving around some boxes and moving my body around a lot. And the next morning, I woke up and my back had seized up on me. And that was the first time that that ever happened. And I had that kind of like, oh my goodness moment. Is this what getting old feels like? At 18. And so what was the solution? I needed to stretch more. And so I then started to develop back problems. I had a standing job. And so I couldn't stand for long periods of time. I always had to sit down, and my back just was always sore. It was always a problem. I would go to yoga teachers years later and just say, I have back problems. And they would say, well, we need to stretch your hamstrings. So I did. They would push me deeper into adjustments. I got into Ashtanga yoga. For many years, I was a huge Ashtangi. And then that kind of switched over. I got into Bikram yoga. And then I got into yin yoga. So I got into all of these things. And nothing ever seemed to really work. I would stretch to, get out of pain, and I would temporarily find some relief, but then the pain always came back. And I, it always kind of looking back now, I think one of the dead giveaways that something wasn't working was that I would wake up in the morning in pain, like, or really stiff. And of course, in the kind of yoga, quote unquote, mindset that I had, it was like, okay, I need to go hit that mat and bang out of practice so I can get rid of that stiffness. And I didn't really understand what the stiffness was about. Now I do. I can go tell my, younger self, that's why you were stiff, but I didn't have that awareness or intelligence back then. And then everything kind of came to a head when I ended up in the hospital. So about 25 years after opening my hips and stretching my hamstrings and, holding child's pose for 5 minutes at a time and pigeon pose for 5 minutes at a time, I ended up in the hospital, barely able to move. And I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that. I remember walking from my car to the emergency room, which should have taken, 30 seconds, took me about 10 minutes of just like hobbling there, going step out, step out. And so I got in there, and the orthopedic surgeon told me we might need to do a spinal fusion on your lower back. Obviously, there was some other steps that they took first, but it was kind of facing a spinal fusion. I had been doing yoga the previous 25 years to avoid this very situation. And that really forced me to ask the question, what don't I know? And so in asking, what don't I know, that led me on this journey of studying muscle activation technique, which was created by a man named Greg Roskoff, who's out of Denver, Colorado. And one of the things I realized very quickly, I mean, I remember when I first started watching the videos, because it's a part of it's an online learning, I was like, I don't know anything about the body. I thought I knew a lot about, movement and function and that sort of thing. I didn't really understand anything about biomechanics. And so that really started to make me kind of go, well, if I don't know, what do other yoga teachers not know? And so that propelled me to create a program for my own yoga teacher trainings. I wanted to find a way to start bringing this into yoga. And that wasn't a straight line. That was a very bendy, curvy line. I look back at some videos I made in those early days, and I'm kind of like, oh boy, let's delete those off the internet. And so it wasn't a straight line, but as I got into it and I started teaching this in my yoga teacher trainings, one of the on retreats, I started quickly noticing people were getting better and becoming pain-free like very quickly. So there's a hands-on methodology to muscle activation technique, but translating it into yoga and bringing it into a yoga practice, which is called the AYAMA, Applied Yoga Anatomy and Muscle Activation, then I started to see the results happen very quickly. And that's what's motivated me to start bringing this more to the forefront instead of keeping it like a little secret in the backwoods of Costa Rica. The reason why I call it Applied Yoga Anatomy and Muscle Activation is one of the things that I've observed in yoga teacher training specifically, but I'm going to go as far as saying any anatomy training, almost any anatomy training, is that anatomy is taught in a way that's, I don't know if this is the best word to use, but it's very heady. It's very analytical. It's very like, this is where your bicep is. This is where your psoas muscle is. But we kind of look at it from outside. And I know that most yoga teacher trainings do this kind of coloring thing. Like they get people to color in where muscles are. which is something I did when I was 9 years old in grade school, and then again every single year after that, to memorize where muscles are. That doesn't teach you anything about the body. And what I quickly realized is the missing link was having that experience of what are the muscles actually doing. And that's where people really kind of fail. Like in yoga, we learn about hip flexors. What do we learn about hip flexors? Well, there's something that we should stretch. We don't actually learn what the hip flexors are, what they do, and actually how to improve hip flexor function, muscle function. We just learn, well, they're there and we should stretch them. That's not learning anatomy. And I always kind of joke, like in the yoga world, yoga teachers always say, like, we have to open the hips. If you ask, I always challenge my students, go home, ask your yoga teacher. So we should open our hips, right? Yes. Okay. What are 3 muscles that we are opening? Like, what are 3 muscles attached to the hips? Okay, if you're lucky and the teacher can answer at least one muscle, okay, then ask the teacher, like, okay, so what does that muscle do? Like, what's the function of that muscle? And then how do we improve that muscle function? And if you actually are lucky enough to find a teacher that can answer those 3 questions, you'll be hard pressed to answer even the first one. But let alone the 3, then how does stretching that muscle improve the muscle function? And so what I'm trying to do in AYAMA is, number one, flip the script on the way that we look at the body. So if we're looking at improving the function of hip flexors, then what do they actually do? Well, they need to contract. They need to shorten. So where are those muscles shortening? And then how do we actually improve that? And that's where the muscle activation part of it comes into it, is that we activate those muscles into working properly by activating their function. That was a lot.
I was going to say, like, digressing, soaking it in. That is anatomy 101. When you were mentioning the muscles, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm such a cheater. I'm abductors, hip flexors, and hip extensions.
You're going through the list of, like, okay, well, there's adductors, but what are the specific muscles? By the way,
right.
If I talk too much, just cut me off, say, but Aaron.
Look, I'm gonna do a fee for this particular podcast. This is like teacher training, $25 episode. Well, it's actually great too, because like somebody who's been around, teaching, and like this evolution of teaching and looking at anatomy from a different lens, right? Like obviously we have to peel layers, and you're not going to get there overnight. But the thing is, like, to me, like when you start talking anatomy, like that is like my nemesis. Like I am not I don't that's not my languaging at all. But somebody who outsources in my teacher training, like I actually shout out to Josh McGurk. He is my anatomy expert, and he has a really fun way of like showing people like how to study and learn anatomy. His first thing is like, stop, we don't stretch. That is his thing. He's like, guys, his thing is like, guys, stretching is a pain point, and we don't want to stress and stretch in yoga. We want to open. We want to, like, he uses languaging that's a little more inviting, instead of this like no pain, no gain attitude. And so that's one of the things that I also lean in now that I'm also a yin yoga teacher. Like I used to be this power all day, all night, give me 85 to 95 degrees. And, after we sweat, we're going to force ourselves to go upside down, and then I discovered yin. So I too appreciate that layer that we're beginning to peel. And people think like you don't have to wait till you're past 40 to understand the dynamics of your anatomy and why stretching is not the goal. It's also serves as preventative,
Yes.
So, and so,
well, and I want to just kind of jump in there and just say that I think that is yoga teachers, or let's even bring it down to yoga practitioners, we have to be honest about what our goal is. And so when I'm talking about like when I created the Stop Stretching, my 8-part series podcast, which is kind of like a documentary-esque kind of podcast. But it's one of the things that I constantly say is like, we're trying to flip the script in the yoga world to, like I feel like stretching and flexibility has kind of hijacked the yoga world. And one of the most fascinating things is like, if you look at the yoga scriptures, there's not one word of stretching or flexibility really ever mentioned. And so all of a sudden now we have Jane Fonda with her leg warmers saying, okay, girls, let's do our yoga practice and stretch. And now we've kind of morphed into something that's completely different. I love what your friend said, like, we're not supposed to be stretching the muscles. And so what is actually happening at a biomechanical level is when one muscle starts working properly and is able to shorten properly, the opposite muscle starts to lengthen. This is called the agonist and antagonistic relationship. And so often people are like, well, Aaron, how do we get one muscle to lengthen? I said, get the opposite muscle to shorten properly. If the muscle is tight, and the reason why I got into yoga was because of my tight hamstrings, ultimately. I hated my tight hamstrings. And so I was hell-bent on trying to stretch them. But the fact that they were tight was telling me the opposite muscles weren't contracting properly. And so instead of like working on getting those muscles to contract properly, I instead focused on stretching them, stretching the hamstrings. And so what I should have been doing was getting those hip flexors working properly. And so when we talk about earlier, like, how do we, this evolution of yoga, and I don't like to say that we've been doing it all wrong, like in the traditional sense of that word. I think that we've kind of changed what yoga should be about. And if you ask yoga teachers what yoga is, very few yoga teachers will give you a good answer, or an intelligent answer, or an answer that is scripturally referenced. And if you ask 1,000 yoga teachers like what yoga should be, they'll be, a lot of times they'll give you this kind of very woke idea. Well, yoga is whatever you want it to be about. and it's like, I potentially never said that. I'm sorry. He did not say that. The Hatha Yoga Pradipika absolutely did not say that yoga should be whatever you want it to be about. They were very clear on the goals of yoga. And so so that's kind of like the perspective that I take, isn't to go like on a whole different tangent, but to actually come back. What is yoga supposed to be about? What is the purpose of asana? And how does that serve us in today's world? Like, how do we bring that idea, that scriptural reference back into our daily life? And so for me, one of the biggest points scripturally is the teachings of Patanjali. In Sutra 246, he says, Stiram Sukhamasanam. And the idea of stira, the word stira translates to steady and stable. And so what we want to do is bring more stability to the body. And I often, did a couple of yoga festivals in this last year. And one of my final comments was, ask yourself if what you're doing is making your students more stable or leaving your students unstable. And if you're leaving your students unstable, you're now setting them up to become, injured and have more problems. So as a yoga teacher, my number one goal is to get people to become more stable. And the result of stability is then pain-free. And so how do we do that? We using the AYAMA philosophy of activate instead of trying to stretch.
And can you share a little bit about how you came up with AYAMA, like the concept of the book, like the name, and like when did you start the writing process?
Yeah, sure. So AYAMA, when I came up with the name, as I was talking about earlier, it stands for Applied Yoga Anatomy and Muscle Activation. Just a quick funny story. I had come up with Applied Yoga Anatomy and Muscle Activation. I never called it really AYAMA. When I was working on the book, one of my people said to me one day as we were kind of creating the outline for it, she said, "Well, how did you come up with the Yama?" I literally turned to her and I said, "What's a Yama?"
I love. I
And
thought that. I thought too. I thought that that was also like, oh, it's one Yama, like not not harmful, like don't hurt yourself, and like here's one Yama. I'm
yes,
like, I didn't know it was an
yes.
acronym. See,
Well, so then she said to me, then I said to her, a yama, and I started to think about it. And then I realized the root word yama is in there. And of course, yamas and niyamas in yoga. And so the word yama means to restraint, like the restraints, the five restraints in the teachings of Patanjali. And then anytime you put an A before a Sanskrit word, it means the opposite. So it means to be unrestrained. And I kind of take a little bit of creative liberty here and say unrestrained power. So a yama means unrestrained power. And so that was like, oh, that's so really cool. So let's go with the yama stuff. But that's how I came up with the word AYAMA. It's just the acronym. It was not intentional at all. When I came up with the word applied yoga anatomy, I knew that I wanted yoga and anatomy in there. I was actually considering using the word experiential because, again, for me, the missing link in a lot of whether it's yoga teacher training or fitness training, the missing link is to make anatomy experiential. Like to actually see somebody's muscles not working properly and then boom, let's get them activated and actually see those muscles working, more efficiently. And so that was a huge part of it, making it more experiential. And then of course the muscle activation part of it. It just kind of evolved over time. For me, the beginning thing was like, let's talk about Paschimottanasana for a second. In Paschimottanasana, normally, which is seated forward bend for your listeners, you fold forward, you grab your feet, you pull yourself forward. But from a yama perspective, that's not what we want to be doing. So in my mind, I started thinking, if I'm teaching seated forward bend, how am I going to do this? And then one of the first answers that came to me was, well, if I'm coming forward, what are the muscles contracting that are helping me to move forward? And so if in your class, Will, are seeing somebody coming into a seated forward fold and they can't really come very far forward, you then immediately go, when I say you, I mean all yoga teachers, go, oh, that person has really tight hamstrings, or that person has a really tight back muscles. That's what's limiting them. But that's actually not true. What's limiting them is because the muscles that are moving them forward are not working properly. So one of the facts that has been really forgotten in the movement world in general is that muscles move bones and muscles stabilize joints. And how do muscles do that? They do that by shortening. Muscles need to shorten, they need to contract. And in an ideal situation, as you're coming forward, they need to be able to contract and contract on demand. So then I started, as I was developing this, I started thinking, okay, how do we get those muscles to what muscles are moving me forward, my trunk flexors and hip flexors, and then what would happen if I improved their functionality? So I started playing with myself and I would like do these little tests to see how far I could come forward, reach my hands over my feet. And then I would activate all my trunk flexor and hip flexor muscles. And then I'd repeat it again. And it would always blow me away because all the tightness in my back, the sometimes even pain in my back when I would come forward, or the tightness in my hamstrings, all of that just kind of left. And I was like, oh my God, this is what it feels like to have, healthy range of motion. And so as I was developing this was how I developed AYAMA. It's like, how do we start to, build up these muscles through these different ranges of motion?
In the writing process, how long did it take for you from the concept conceiving to putting on paper? Did you journal? Did it become a book, or was there an intention to write the book? It's kind of curious, like what that process was to actually go to print.
I wrote the book in 2022 and then launched it in October. A lot of writing went into it before I actually wrote the book. A lot of experimentation, a lot of methodology. I'd already been teaching the methodology in my yoga teacher trainings. So it wasn't necessarily a straight line. When it finally came time to writing the book, it was pretty effortless. I mean, as effortless as it can be to write a book. But it was, already I had been practicing this and putting this together and teaching it for a long period of time. So putting the book together was just really a continuation of what I had been teaching. I will tell you that one of the inspirations, I'm almost hesitant or reticent to give the name of the book, but there was another book that I was inspired by, written by a teacher in the Vinyasa Krama tradition. I'm not going to name the book here, but I had that book for a long time in my yoga teacher training. And by the time I started teaching AYAMA, I still was referencing that book. And I had students come up to me saying, Aaron, why are you referencing this book? It's teaching stretching. And that was like the light bulb moment, like, oh, I need to write my own book. So when I wrote Stop Stretching, it was really a replacement for that book. And the idea then was to have something in my arsenal that could become more solid for my students to use.
Got it. And the book is ready in Amazon. Yes, people can order that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, people can go to Amazon. They make great Christmas presents, everybody.
Of course, right? Of course. And also, while we're at it, like, when's the next teacher training? And do you provide that online? Do you provide that live? And, tell us a little bit about that.
People can study with me. They can do my online. I have an online yoga teacher training for people who can't come to Costa Rica and study with me. I also have the online AYAMA certification program. So that's available for people. They can do that from home as well. And I also do live yoga teacher trainings. I've got 3 scheduled for next year right now. One is in May. The second one is in September. So the first one's in May at Blue Osa in Costa Rica at my yoga retreat. Then the second one is going to be actually in India, which I'm so excited about. And so I'm going to be doing that September 4th. It's a 2-week teacher training in India. And people will have an option to join me in the South India afterwards for a yoga retreat at an Ayurvedic center. And then I'm going to be doing another one at Blue Osa at the end of October. So that's what's happening next year.
Amazing. Not that I'm cutting
you.
this off anytime soon. I just want to make sure that I get that segment out of the way as far as the AYAMA experience. I have, where do they get more info and to register?
Yeah, the best way for people to find out about me is either on my website, yogiaaron.com. Just contact me and ask for more information. I also have a freebie on my website, which is a 7 days to becoming pain-free series. So if they go to my website, yogiaaron.com, they can get access immediately to the 7-day pain-free series. So anybody who's dealing with lower back pain or hip pain, it's a really potent series. I've helped thousands of people get over pain. And then once they start getting plugged in there, they can easily get in contact with me. And then they can also just reach out to me on Instagram. I'm always available on Instagram. to answer questions for people who are dealing with specific issues.
And that's also Yogi Aaron, right? That's your handle?
Yes, Yogi Aaron. Thank you.
Good, good, good. Coco,
Hey, hey.
hi. And I didn't mean to like monopolize this segment here. I know that this was your jam that you're going to be joining Aaron. I'm doing like, what is it, fandom? I'm like, oh my God, Yogi Aaron.
No worries. I mean, he's the special guest. That's what it's all about. Let's see. Do I have anything else? Any concluding statements? I'm doing the online version of AYAMA training. Super excited about that. One of the guys in my community is going to India with you. So that's super exciting also.
Yay!
Very happy for him. Yeah. Yeah. So I feel
think
like
he was supposed to come with me to India before, and then of course the whole lockdown thing happened. So I'm very excited to have him come.
Yeah, he's had a history of pain with herniated discs, and so he complained about that to me, and I sent him one of your things, and then he's like, so, apparently he already knew about you. But that's really exciting. I feel personally that I'm in a stage of kind of being underground a little bit. Like I'm still there for my students and people who really know how to get in contact with me. But I got knocked off my feet a lot recently. I've been really bumping up into life. And so I'm underground, like integrating those lessons and figuring out how to rebirth myself. So I'll be back soon and in a powerful new form. I'm pretty excited, but that's where I'm at. And doing this AYAMA training is definitely going to be part of it. Being off Instagram and less available is allowing me to build my own website, do trainings, and like do real stuff besides being available to chat with people constantly. So
yes.
So if you look for me, you will not find me unless we're already talking.
We can find you. If you're looking for Coco, call me. I will find Coco for you.
And I actually know where he lives.
See, there you go, right? I'll make sure we'll make sure he gets the message.
Only important ones, please. Only one of the important ones.
Right, exactly. VIP only, please.
If you ain't trying to pay me, then don't contact me.
Right. I want to switch gears real quick. So Blue Osa. So yes. before we hit the record button, I was asking you where you were at. You said you're in your apartment, and that's still in Costa Rica, and that's away from Blue Osa. So first of all, congrats for having two spaces that you can retreat.
Thank you.
So tell us about Blue Osa and how that came to be, and why Costa Rica. And I've seen some celebrity yogis also host their retreats there. So tell us about the hub.
Sure. Well, so going back to hot nude yoga, one of the things that I was very lucky to do was be able to start leading yoga retreats around the world. And it really started from my students. They asked me one time, Aaron, like, when are we going to do a retreat? We should go away for a weekend. And so the very first retreat I did, we actually had 46 people come. It was in upstate New York at a place called Easton Mountain Retreat. And it was just such a magical experience. I mean, 3 days, in nature, in a place where we could literally run around naked, like literally, and be as free as we wanted to be. And then in the space of doing yoga and chanting and learning mantras and talking about philosophy and really kind of in that space for 3 days to elevate each other to become the best versions of ourselves. And so that kind of opened my eyes up. And that same year was 2022. I started to think about when I really wanted to go to Hawaii. And so I decided to take the time to go to Hawaii. I went for about, I think it was 3 weeks or a month. I landed in a place called Kalani, which is on the big island of Hawaii. And immediately I was like, I've got to do a yoga retreat here. So I just asked my community, do you guys want to come? And all 46 of them came with me to Kalani, which was one of the most amazing experiences. Funny quick story, where in like the warm pond. So on the big island, you have these like little spaces where this kind of hot water pools into where the ocean meets, and it creates like this, they call them warm ponds. And so the very first night, I got all of these guys to come with me to the warm pond. So all 46 of us are in the warm pond, and I was kind of guiding everybody through doing some Watsu. The police showed up. What are you guys all doing here? 46 naked men. So that was just something kind of like, in the memory archives, where hot nude yoga interfaces with life, real life. So a few years later, I had started leading yoga retreats in Costa Rica, and on one retreat, I was just driving down the road, and there was a Century 21 sign outside this property. And I had already been thinking about this idea of creating a space for community and really for gay men. I mean, at the inception of the inception of Blue Osa, it was really supposed to be a naked gay men's ashram. And what I realized really quickly was that was not a sustainable plan. So it quickly then changed into, Blue Osa Yoga Retreat and Spa, which was completely fine. I'm really happy with the direction it went, because what I did was I took all of those best elements of Blue Osa, of hot nude yoga, which was about community, of creating safe space, of instilling sort of yogic values, which is kind of a loaded statement, I know. But when I say that, I mean eating clean food, eating together, saying prayer before you eat, having more moments of morning silence. Right from the beginning of opening Blue Osa, we've practiced morning silence until 7:30 every morning. And so bringing these kind of yogic qualities into sort of a retreat setting has been a huge gift for so many people that have come there. So that's kind of the little bit of a story of Blue Osa.
I've had this idea / fantasy that if and when Men of Yoga ever has its first retreat, that it has to be at your spot, you know.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate
Well,
that.
because I'm thinking also like Coco's out there, and I'm like, I do get a lot of DMs like, when is Men of Yoga going to be, a retreat, so on and so forth. It's a challenge getting the boys at the same place at the same time, and I gotta,
Yes.
clap at Coco for pulling off a retreat that he hosted in Gordonville, California during the summer. Like he was able to do
Yes.
it. You know what I mean? And it's like there's hope. So I think
Yes.
like
If I
I'm
can do
definitely
it,
going,
then
you know
it can be
well
done.
in 2025, that's, we're all in with Men of Yoga, because some health issues that my husband I had last year. We have to go back into the studio space and kind of make sure that that's nice and healthy, and then next year we're going to refocus, we'll set our focus back to Men of Yoga. It's such a, I think it's just, for me personally, it's come a time in my life where it's like, I just turned 58. I'm getting close to 60. Like, I want, I want to send the message out there. Like, getting older as a gay man is pretty fucking rad.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes, it
Like, it's
is.
just, yeah, beyond the clubs and beyond the drugs and beyond all those hot, steamy nights. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, it just gets awesome, and you just have to surround yourself with the right people and stay connected. And that's really like my
Yes.
goal, is to make sure that, we as a group, as a community, stay connected, because that's the thing that keeps
Yeah.
us sane and above water.
Yeah.
It's those
Yes.
connections. So
Well, I think one of the very first things to lead a successful yoga retreat is ask people if they want to travel with you,
right,
and just
yeah,
check in with your community. And then once that happens, everything else sort of flows from that. I'm leading this trip to India, and I basically sold it out, like sold out portions of it, like within the first 3 weeks of announcing it. So having like knowing that people want to travel with you is so important, or knowing that people want to do a retreat with you is so important. And I will, I'd love to support you, of course, in leading a retreat. And I'm actually teaming up with my brother Colby Smith, who's also another leader in this industry. And so we do stuff together. Maybe we can combine all of our resources and create something stupendous.
Absolutely.
'Cause
Colby's out in
nothing
Florida.
makes me happier than naked men.
Yeah.
Same, bro.
I know, right? I think everybody on screen can agree that, like, well, that's a good chunk of it.
Yes, yes.
Colby is the one. Colby's in Florida.
He's actually in Jersey, but he does a lot of things. He does a lot of retreats
Okay.
in Florida. Yes, that is correct.
Got it. Which was going to actually be my next question. How have you survived and succeeded? And I'm sure that you have your ups and downs. Like, was there like a collab? Do you have a team? Like, who's kind of helped you pave the way, or is this all Aaron Starr production?
Are you talking about with AYAMA or Blue Osa, or
Tell me
what are you?
just some pro tips in terms of like keep going. Like, have you always collaborated? Have you always been
Like,
by yourself?
surely you got to be delegating some things to some people.
I think part of it is having like a competent team around you. Like at Blue Osa, I had the most amazing team of people who are really dedicated to creating and holding the space that's needed for the people that are coming to Blue Osa. And they take a lot of joy in it. It's I mean, I'm very lucky because with Costa Ricans, one of their MOs is that they like to see other people happy. They don't like to see people not happy. So they do their best to make sure people are happy for the most part. And so you kind of take that, you nurture that quality, and then boom, you've got a very competent team. So it's like having people around you that are competent, pay attention to the gems when they show up, and keep them close to you as much as possible. Yes, I do have people around me that are supportive, and they do like little work for they do some works for me. And that's such an important ingredient. Like you've just got to have that or you implode.
And there you go, folks. Pro tip from Yogi Aaron.
And the other pro tip, stop stretching,
Stop
start
stretching.
activating, and live pain-free.
Yeah.
And there's also merch. There's also merch available. Let's talk about the merch real quick.
Yes, well, people can go and get
See?
the book on Amazon. They can also get the free pain-free series, and right on my website is a store people can go to get a t-shirt if they want to. There's some really cool t-shirts there. One of them I'm wearing right now. Wear this into your next yoga class.
I love that.
Your teacher will implode.
As you also refuse to do child's pose.
Yes, as you refuse to do child's pose.
Right? We also have merch, menofyoga.men.
Awesome. Awesome.
This is
Beautiful.
all we get to toss it all in there. Don't forget the human design and like
I don't have any merch yet, but no, I do have merch, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, I've sent a couple of shirts over Roscoe and Pepe's way, and I'm over there forcing them to wear clothes. Like, please just wear the t-shirt just for this photo shoot.
Don't wear anything else except the t-shirt. That's
right,
hot.
just the t-shirt. Oh, it's out there. It's out there.
I've done some photo shoots like that.
Yes,
yeah, Coco's my hot
that's
super.
very sexy.
That is my hot supermodel right there. All right, boys. Is there anything else that we would like to share before we wrap it up?
No, I'm good. I thank you guys so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. I always love coming on and talking about my greatest passion these days is to help people live pain-free. I think it's as yoga teachers is potentially the greatest gift that we can offer people is how to experience no pain in the body. So thank you very much.
You are so welcome. I'm so stoked that you joined us today.
Thank you.
Roscoe, Coco, anything else?
Nope. Thank you so much for listening. And I'm really happy that I got to be here. And yeah, it's an honor, Aaron.
Thank you. Thanks, my friend.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your day, sirs. Have a good one.
You
Be
guys
well.
too. Thank you, Gayru. All right, dude, that's all for this episode. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. And if you did enjoy it, please remember to subscribe. And if you want to plug into the Men of Yoga community even more deeply, you can follow us on Instagram and or Facebook. Links are in the description. And also leave us some comments. Let us know what you liked about the episode, as well as what other juicy topics you'd like for us to open up and explore, because it all gets to be here. All right. So go have a great day on and off the mat, and hopefully we'll see you next time.